Hey y'all, welcome to my channel called Itching Ears. This is Itching Ears is a reference to 2 Timothy 4:3, which says, "For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions." I made this channel. I want this channel to glorify God by examining what people say about God and see if His Word agrees. That's it. It's not fancy, super high tech or anything. I'm just using a webcam. I'm not even looking at it because it feels weird to look way up there. You're probably going to hear the kids or the dogs in the background. No big deal. I'm not, some super smart guy. Not, some super spiritual giant. I'm just a regular guy, super inconsistent in a lot of ways. Terribly sinful, but loved and forgiven by a wonderful, incredible, merciful, loving God. We're here to look at churches, pastors, preachers, organizations that say stuff about God, and we're going to put them to the test of God's Word. So you might say, why would I? The heck is that? You might ask, why I would take the time to do something like this, and to put it plainly, because the Bible commands it. I'm going to pull up a few scriptures on this real quick. Let's see. Yada, yada, yada. Just a few scriptures. Matthew 24:24 says, "For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect." So false messiahs and false prophets, and they're actually going to do stuff that, if it was possible, even the elect of God would be deceived. In Matthew 16:11 and 12, Jesus is telling the disciples to be on guard against the false teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. We've already looked at 2 Timothy 4, people not putting up with sound doctrine. They don't want to hear good, solid teaching. They'd rather surround themselves with people who, tickle or scratch their itching ears. Acts 20 is a direct command. It says, "Keep watch over yourselves and all the flock that you're overseers of. After I leave, savage wolves will come in among you and will not spare the flock. Even men from your own number will arise and distort the truth in order to draw away disciples after themselves." And then 1 John 4, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world," and on and on. I mean, there's so many, Jesus saying, watch out for false prophets. They come in sheep's clothing, but they're ferocious wolves, on and on. There's so many scriptures that talk about the reality that there are false teachers, false teachings. So what? I mean, nobody's denying that. We know that people teach wrong things about God all the time. So what? Why do I feel the need to say something about it? And I've heard this a lot, who do you think you are opposing, men of God? And I found a really good article on this from John Piper at Desiring God. I'll make sure to put a link to all these articles down below in the description, so y'all can go, read them for yourself and read the scriptures for yourself. But this Desiring God article, it's actually not an article, it's an audio transcript. Somebody asked John Piper a question and he answered it. It's a pretty good thing to do with a question. But anyways, the question is, should we call out false teachers or ignore them? I mean, some people would say, don't worry about it. Ignore it. Or don't, maybe not ignore it, but don't call them out. And so John Piper starts with Matthew 7, "Beware of false prophets." Beware is like an action word, and it's a command for us to be aware, be alert of these false teachers who would claim to be sheep. They pretend like they're sheep, but they're actually wolves who are there to devour the sheep. And that same Greek word for beware is the same in Acts 20, the one we read a minute ago, where he says, pay attention, pay careful attention to yourselves and the flock, because after I leave, fierce wolves will come in, and all of that. Same with the one in same word again in Matthew 16, where he talks about the leaven or the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. He's talking about the false teaching of them. And he says, watch and beware. So we definitely aren't supposed to ignore it. We're supposed to be aware of the fact that these things exist. So what do we do with it? In Philippians 3, Paul says, look out for the dogs, look out for the evildoers, look out for those who mutilate the flesh, many of whom I have often told you, and now tell you even with tears, walk as enemies of the cross of Christ. Watch out for those who cause divisions. Okay, now let's stop there, because people have accused me of causing division in the past. We got to be really careful to use, if we're going to use biblical language, we need to use it in the way that the Bible uses it. There are scriptures that talk about causing division or, not keeping the unity or something like that. But that is always about the person who is teaching falsely, not about the person who is exposing the error. So right here, he says, watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them. And that's super important. To avoid them, you got to know who they are. You can't avoid somebody if you don't know who they are. This is from the website here. And John Piper says, this idea of identifying and avoiding shows up in 1 Corinthians 5:11, 2 Thessalonians 3:6 and 14, 2 Timothy 3:5, 2 John 10. In other words, Christians and shepherds in particular should be discerning and alert to behavior and teaching that dishonors Christ and destroys people, and to not treat it in a casual or harmless way. The last thing I'll say about this is in 1 Timothy 5:19 and 20, Paul went beyond just avoid them to rebuke them publicly. And he says, do not admit a charge against an elder except on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. As for those who persist in sin, and that can be the sin of false doctrine or sin of evil behavior, anyone who does not accept correction, rebuke them in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear. So that's why I do what I do, because there are people whose souls are at stake, and there are wolves in the church posing as sheep who are taking advantage of people and teaching what they ought not to teach for gain. If I care about them, if I care about truth, if I care about the church, the bride of Christ, how could I stand by and not say something?
Hey, y'all try not to stomp real hard on the floor, please.